Do you have any reason to believe that this investigation has been discredited?
Senator, as I said to you last month, and as I said before, I do not believe Special Counsel Mueller is on a witch hunt.
That was the head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, testifying before Senate Judiciary this morning. He and Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz were on the Hill to defend the IG report on the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. The investigation found that former FBI Director James Comey breached protocol and was insubordinate but was not politically motivated in his handling of the Hillary Clinton email probe. President Trump has touted the report's findings as proof the Justice Department was out to get him and declared that it cleared his name. But the Inspector General disputed those claims today.
There's nothing in the report that says it exonerates the president from any question of collusion with the Russians. It says nothing one way or the other. Is that correct?
We did not look into collusion questions.
With us tonight to talk about it, Cynthia Oxney, a former federal prosecutor and a veteran of the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department. Cynthia, welcome back to the broadcast. I'm about to ask you about the Inspector General. Is the only reason we're talking about this the fact that the president erroneously came out and said that the document cleared him?
Probably. He likes to lie about things, so that's not surprising that he's chosen this. But the Inspector General's report did not go into either the collusion or even the obstruction investigation. That's Bob Mueller's job, and he will tell us when he's ready what the answer to those questions are.
Maggie Haberman of the New York Times made a point over the weekend that President Trump has really devoted social media, his Twitter feed, to his own self-defense. Every day, a fusillade, including but not limited to charges of a witch hunt. With your knowledge of the Mueller operation and the Mueller mindset, how do you think that has gone over?
I do think they ignore it. I really do. I think Bob Mueller would view that as unimportant and not something he needs to follow. The president can tweet all he wants, and Bob Mueller is not the least bit interested in his tweets.
I want to read you reporting of our own Ken Delanian about this meeting with Roger Stone and Mr. Caputo. Roger Stone and Michael Caputo say they forgot to tell investigators about their contact with a Russian national who goes by the name Henry Greenberg, even though they say this Greenberg fellow offered to sell incriminating information to the Trump campaign for $2 million. Well, first of all, how often in life are you just offered $2 million for campaign dirt so I can see them forgetting? How is Mueller likely to approach that story? Why didn't you tell us the first time?
He's likely to approach it as a lie. That's basically what it is. I mean, this guy came to them. He was a Russian, and Caputo knew he was a Russian. He set up the meeting with Roger Stone. Roger Stone met him. He had a heavy Russian accent. Roger Stone remembered his accent. He remembered his hat. He remembered his T-shirt. He remembered he offered him $2 million in return for dirt. And then they had text messages exchanged. And then he forgot it all. Now, what are the chances of that? And suddenly, when Bob Mueller's office could produce the text to Caputo when he was being interviewed, they remembered. It was just a miracle. It just came back up. It was just shocking. So now they're amending their testimony to try to get away from not being charged with perjury.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.